Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. And as always, thank you so much for joining me. So today we are going to get into some of the esoteric keys to disclosure, or some of the esoteric keys to understanding extraterrestrials or interdimensionals and our ancient past, and also certain technologies that exist that are kind of falling underneath this disclosure umbrella. And there is quite a lot that's going on in the news and just in the world right now. And it's really challenging to decide, what to talk about. There's so many different things we could get to the esoteric nuts and bolts of. But I think the operations that are going on with disclosure right now are probably some of the most dangerous spiritually, and also the most dangerous psychologically, because at this point in society, we are extremely technologically advanced, but we're very spiritually behind. And we don't actually, as a society, as a world right now, fully understand spiritual science or occult science or mystery science. And so what's happening is we're getting this wave of conversation and, disclosure about our ancient past, about technologies, about, eventually about our origins. And we don't really have a foundation to receive that. And if we don't have a strong foundation to receive that, if we don't have some kind of understanding of the esoteric dynamics of the earth and humanity, then we're just going to basically be fed a bunch of lies, and maybe even, evidence of these lies, scientific evidence of these lies. And we're going to believe it because we just don't have anything within our lexicon to weigh these disclosure lies against. And on top of that, we're very caught up in a materialist ideology that just naturally destroys any kind of understanding of higher worlds, even though humanity has come from those higher worlds, and the very planet that we exist on is a manifestation of those higher worlds. And so we're actually in a very spiritually and psychologically dangerous position in society, where what's going on with disclosure, and it is government sanctioned disclosure by the same secret societies and dark groups that have been running things for the whole time, this religion piece that's coming through disclosure is something that could really usurp our spirituality and our culture and really replace it with something that we don't want. And so we really have to have these esoteric keys of disclosure so that we can confront what's coming properly. So sometimes when you mention occult science, people can become intimidated, and they feel like, this is esoteric, is so there's so much going on, there's so much detail, it's so intense to learn. And I want to remind you that everything that I'm going to say in this lecture series is stuff that you already know. That's the thing about spiritual science, is that you're not really hearing something that's new to you, right? At the heart, at the core of all spiritual knowledge is the reality that you already know this. And the reason why you already know everything that I'm going to talk about here, and pretty much everything that I talk about on my channel, is because you've lived it. You've lived it in the many different lives that you have walked the earth. Okay? And you have this knowledge deep, deep, deep in your soul. It's part of you. That's why things either resonate or they don't resonate, and we're drawn into things or we're not drawn into things, is because there's actually a truth in our soul. Reality actually exists in our soul. And so you don't actually have to learn spiritual science like you're learning physics, like you're learning math, like you're learning history in that sense. there's something much deeper to these topics that deep within you already know. And with anything, you know, spiritual science can be very detailed, and it can become very complex, but we can also enter into it in a very kind of layman's understanding and do really well with it. You know, it's kind of however deep you want to go, but we do have to have some foundation in order to move forward in a healthy way in society. So today we're going to be talking about one concept that is completely missing from pretty much every disclosure conversation out there. It just does not exist. And every ET conversation or every extraterrestrial conversation, interdimensional conversation, whatever language you want to call it, it's like a heyday of different terms for different things. But this concept, it does not exist in the mainstream conversations about interdimensionals and aliens and technology and our ancient past. This one concept is completely left out. And because it's not talked about, because we don't understand it, we're not going to be able to enter into any disclosure conversations properly. And this one conversation is that the Earth evolves, and as the Earth evolves, it changes density. It changes form. Okay, so when we look back into our ancient times, even millions of years ago, tens of millions of years ago, we're not really looking at a planet that is solid like it is today. We're looking at a planet that is less dense than it is today. And so the best way to actually view time, or how time should primarily or firstly be observed, is actually developmentally. And once we understand time in a developmental sense, how humanity is developing and how Earth is developing, then we can start getting into time more as we talk about it in a more linear, material way. But the first thing we have to understand about our planet and about our past is that if you go back far enough into our ancient past, you're going to go so far back that the Earth actually is less dense. It's actually a different density. The mineral kingdom behaves differently. The plant kingdom behaves differently. The animal kingdom is also behaving differently. And the human being is also in a different stage of evolution. So the biggest mistake that people make is they take exactly where we are today, the density of the planet and the level of consciousness that we are now, and they roughly project that back as far as they can go. And so they put an imprint or a shell of our current culture, our current level of development, and the current and the Earth's current level of solidity. And they say it was the same in earlier times, even going back to Atlantis or Lemuria, which were actually two very real civilizations that existed before our own. So we are projecting our idea of the past. So we're creating a different past for ourselves, essentially, by projecting our own reality on the past. And we cannot do that because, again, if you go far enough back in time, you're looking at the Earth being an actual different density. Okay? And this is why you actually see one of the most popular concepts in the New Age is this idea of ascension and this idea of humanity and the Earth sort of releasing itself from matter, or spiritualizing itself out of matter. In esoteric Christianity, this spiritualization out of matter is called the resurrection mysteries. And so ascension, resurrection, whatever you want to call it, this is one of the most popular ideas in modern spirituality. And it is that because just as our past, we were less dense, our future, the future of the planet, also is to become less and less dense, to spiritualize out of matter. So that is the actual evolutionary life of the planet. And the human being is going right along with it as well. They're united. So let's get into, before we go any more deeper into the misunderstandings that arise from not grasping this ideology, let me go and describe very briefly the prior epochs of the Earth, just so we can have some structure here. Okay, so the Earth began its life as we know it, in this plane as we know it, in an astral form. And it existed in an astral form for a very long time. And in this astral form, what was happening was the sort of sparks of life and archetypal patterns from the higher planes and from the spiritual hierarchies were being patterned on this sort of astral mass that is the Earth. And over time, the Earth became denser and it became a more etheric body. But it was still in this period of being patterned with these sparks of life and archetypes from the higher planes. So here in this lower plane that's forming, we have really the depositing of all of these patterns and life essences from higher worlds. And so the first period of life is called involution. And the planet is in this period of involution, kind of like an inward spiral, where it's materializing, it's gaining density, and it's gaining matter. And it exists like this for an extremely long period of time, a very significant period of time. For a very significant period of time, the Earth actually was not even solid. It was simply being, again, patterned with the essence of life and the archetypes of life that were eventually going to take form. So it's sort of like a seeding, if you will. And then once we get to the Lemurian epoch, the Earth finally begins to materialize. So the prior epochs in occult science are often called the Polarian epoch and the Hyperborean epoch. And so once we get to this third epoch, it's called the Lemurian epoch, and we see the rise of the Lemurian civilization and the Lemurian level of human being, or the Lemurian human being, the human being of the Lemurian culture and civilization. And during this time in Lemuria, it is not nearly as solid as it is now, but it's solid enough that finally the human form is able to take shape. However, the human form is sort of shifting and reflecting all of these different influences that the form is now receiving from both the Earth as it has developed and also the higher planes. So the form is really, in Lemuria, it's really kind of like a shape-shifting form, if you will. It is reflecting the forms that it's receiving from the Earth and what it has grasped at this time. And then it is all, the human form is also still reflecting these spiritual impressions and waves. And so the Earth doesn't fully solidify into the hardness and the rigidness of the mineral kingdom until the Atlantean epoch, about halfway through. And so once we get to the Atlantean epoch, we reach peak materiality, and the human form becomes as dense as it is today, and it takes the form that it is today. Then, after the Atlantean epoch is completed, we move into something called the post-Atlantean epoch, and we begin to spiritualize again out of matter. Okay, now there's a lot more to this that has to do with development, but just to illustrate to you this arc of involution, or the gaining of matter, peak materiality that's reached, often symbolized by a cross, okay? And then there is the evolution of matter, the evolution of the planet, or the spiritualization of humanity and of the planet out of matter. That is the developmental arc of our planet. That is the history and the future of our planet. And every single religion or mystery tradition or spirituality is working within understanding the specific kind of shifts in consciousness that are needed as we make it through all of these very different epochs of development that we have to adapt to. Okay? So during these different epochs, the Earth is really different. The air, the elements are different. Back in the Lemurian time, the air was actually thicker and the water was thinner. And so the elements are expressing themselves a little bit differently. So this reality, that if you go back to the Lemurian epoch, and the human being's form is basically shifting according to different forces it's receiving. If you were to look back at that as a mystic, you would look back at that prior condition of the Earth and you would say, that's not the Earth. You'd look at that and you'd say, that is another planet. And the being that I'm seeing is absolutely an alien, or it's something else, right? And this is exactly what happens to a lot of people when they look back into the Lemurian epoch and they see the world so different, and the human form is of a different density. The Earth is of a different density. Everything is a little shifted. They think, well, this is a different planet. And so they begin to think that their own world, our own planet, is an alien world. And that humanity is an alien being, because it's not the developmental level that they're at today. And because we don't know that the planet has shifted in density, the elemental expressions are different. We don't know how, as psychics, to go back to these time periods and observe them, because we don't know the academic side of occult knowledge, which is that there have been these massive shifts in the quality of the Earth, the quality of consciousness, what a human being is. And so when we go back to the Lemurian epoch, we see things that are so different than our world today that we think it's alien, because we don't know our own history. And the strange thing is that what we're talking about today, our ancient past, how the world is actually formed, which is esoteric cosmology and anthropogenesis and cosmogenesis, these were the first things that were taught in traditional mystery schools in both the Eastern traditions and the Western traditions. One of the first things that people would learn in these sacred mystery traditions was the lay of the land and how a planet is formed, what a planet is, and the cycles of life and birth and death that it goes through, or involution and evolution, and the human being's role in all of these cycles of development. Everything from the precession of the equinox, the polar day, the polar night, the Manvantara, all of this, the breaths of Brahma, all of this is literally describing the life of a planet from its birth or its descension into matter to its death in the material plane and its resurrection into higher planes. What we're talking about here is the very foundation of knowledge that we need to work with. It is the law of our own evolution, of our planet's evolution. And working without understanding it leads us into delusion, because we start to label things incorrectly and work with an incorrect paradigm. And we all know it happens in mathematics when you start with the wrong number in an equation, when you start with the wrong concept when you're working out a problem. The whole thing is skewed. And this is what's happening when people are trying to read the Akashic records. We cannot read the Akashic records unless we actually have the education and the spiritual knowledge of our reality. And you can't channel it all yourself, because nobody is God with the ability to just see everything objectively. We actually have to study spiritual science to understand these things. And then we can become creative with our psychic abilities. We have to have this structure. Now, the same thing happens with Atlantis as well. People will go and have a past life memory, or they'll have a psychic vision, and they'll go back to Atlantis. And they'll see themselves flying in basically what look like UFOs or spacecrafts. They'll see different looking people, right? They may see interdimensional beings walking around, okay? They may see incredible architecture that doesn't really look like our modern times exactly, kind of, but not really, right? They may see a significantly more advanced spiritual society. And they'll look at that and they'll say, this is another planet. And they may even psychically tune into the planetary and star influences that govern that period of time and say, oh, this is the Pleiades, oh, this is Sirius, oh, this is whatever. Because what they're really picking up on is certain planetary influences that are ruling that era of time. Because time in the long term is actually tracked through stars and planets. We know that. So what happens is that people will go back, they'll see our own ancient past and the advanced technologies that we've had, like spaceships, like interplanetary ships, advanced technology, flying around, things like that. And they're like, well, this can't be human. This can't be on Earth. So this must be a different planet altogether. And it's Atlantis. It's literally the same planet. It's another time of our own human culture, our own human development that we're looking at. But because that civilization rose and it fell, and we have no real records of it that are available to us. Secret societies certainly have them. But because we don't have those records, we don't have that evidence, we're flying blind, we automatically think that our own past civilizations are alien to us. We think that they're alien civilizations. We think that humanity in those time periods, because they were under different cosmic influences, are aliens. And this is something that I come across quite a bit whenever I'll do a short, or I'll talk about Lemuria or Hyperborea or the Polarian epoch. There's always a significant number of people that will say, listen, I'm a Lemurian starseed. I'm an Atlantean starseed. I'm a Hyperborean starseed. I'm a Polarian starseed. Look, you're not a Lemurian starseed. Lemuria is not out there in the stars somewhere. Lemuria is the prior civilization of humanity. It is the third epoch of the earth. And so we have this incredible urge, this incredible desire to label things that are us, things that are from our planet, times, eras, cultures that are from our planet that are completely human, alien. And so we really have to watch this pattern, because it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And the problem with labeling everything extraterrestrial and labeling everything alien is it really kind of places us as a child, where if something's truly alien, if something's truly extraterrestrial, and there isn't really that much of a connection to us, it's a totally different world, essentially, parallel to ours, then we can't really know much about that, right? We can't really understand that. So in a sense, we're kind of sitting ducks to these ideologies where these aliens or extraterrestrials, are coming around, right? And we're projecting our own culture and calling it alien because we're just not understanding our own ancient past. And in these earlier time periods, why people also get kind of confused as well is that from the Lemurian epoch to about the first half of the Atlantean epoch, humanity could actually influence the mineral kingdom and the earth through their will. So they could actually shape rocks, they could shape buildings, and the earth was actually very malleable. So stone was malleable, and the human being was not fallen, right? So they weren't an individual yet. And so what happened is that human beings kind of functioned in this hive mind, and they would just sort of carry out the will of God or participate in the will of God, really. They didn't have their I yet, their I am yet, their mind and their individuality yet. And so human beings could kind of gently participate in what God was already creating and what was already going on. And they learned that they could sort of shape the elements and control the elements, control water a little bit, control minerals and rocks and stones, and sort of build temples and do these really incredible things. And also stones weren't nearly as heavy because they weren't as dense yet. And so the world from about, for the Lemurian epoch and about halfway into the Atlantean epoch, we're looking at a world where everything is a lot more malleable. And when we understand this, we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, is that why some of these megaliths that exist, that modern science, according to materialist standards, says is pretty much impossible, or they give some absolutely ridiculous estimate about how it's done, it was done. A lot of these incredible buildings were done and completed either when the world was less dense, when the planet was less dense. And there were also technologies that were developed in the Atlantean epoch that were significantly more advanced that would actually be able to move these stones and create these megaliths. Okay, so first of all, the density was different. The density of stone was different, and second of all, during the Atlantean era, it was extremely scientific. There was a lot of developments. We're repeating that now in a recapitulation. And there were actually incredible technologies that allowed these stones to be moved and that allowed certain temples and certain structures to be developed. Also, like I said before, there's incredible advanced technologies that we would call UFOs today. And in Atlantis, we were also spacefaring. So we had the ability to sort of project and leave the planet in various different ways. There's different ways to, be spacefaring, or there's different ways to visit other worlds besides a ship. So when we look at this, what we're actually seeing, what we're actually looking at is the reality that what we're calling an extraterrestrial craft, or what we're calling an extraterrestrial being, if you want to use reason, it's actually much more likely that it is ours. It is actually much more likely that these advanced technologies that people want to call alien or from another world or from another dimension, it's much more likely, much more probable that these technologies are from the Atlantean era, and that certain secret societies or breakaway civilizations, as they're often called, have kept this technology, understand certain esoteric secrets, and are simply redeveloping the technology for our era, for our epoch, which is a little bit different in quality than the Atlantean epoch. But they still have the technology and they still have the secrets of the technology. They're within these secret societies and they're within these breakaway civilizations. And what I mean by breakaway civilization is that when the catastrophes of Atlantis hit, which we would know that as Noah's flood, we would know that as the flooding of the earth around 10, 11,000 years ago. There were people that essentially went into the earth or went into space or tried to go on to other planets, whether it be the moon or Mars or wherever, to escape the catastrophes. And there's also components of those people on the planet. Okay, so there is a lineage of individuals who obviously have survived the catastrophes of Atlantis through various different means, whether it be going off planet to the moon or Mars, potentially. Well, not potentially, but going off world and trying to develop something. And then also, going underground, right? So this gets into the fascinating conversation around crypto-terrestrials and sort of parallel civilizations that are essentially living amongst us on the planet that are basically from prior epochs of the earth. That's a very big conversation we'll probably get into in our next lecture. But I hope that I'm painting the picture that rather than paint everything as being alien or extraterrestrial or even interdimensional, why are we avoiding and not directly confronting the reality that we've had very advanced civilizations on our planet, namely the Atlantean civilization that had spacefaring technology, that had extremely advanced crafts, and was building advanced temple structures, new occult science, and was in many respects more advanced than we are today? Why are we just leaving that behind? Why is that not being brought up? The reason why is, again, because when we make something alien, when we make something extraterrestrial, okay, we don't have any way to understand it fully or control it or know it. When something is Atlantean or from a prior epoch of the earth, that signals to us that the knowledge is actually within us. Do you see the difference? So by making something alien, extraterrestrial, interdimensional, we're really quite helpless because there's this thing that's coming from out there that may have some kind of connection to us. But whenever it has a connection to us, it's always, oh, it created us, which is a whole other problem as well that I'll get to in my next lecture. So there is this effort, whether it be on purpose or because the people that push this in society are subject to this delusion themselves. There is this effort to make everything alien. Everything is extraterrestrial. And the result is that we live in a fragment and we live in a lie. We live in a fragment because we're thinking, listen, life only started, that we know of, like 12,000 years ago or something. Anything before that, we just don't really get into. Or if we get into it, it's very primitive. So we're trapped in this fragment where we think that whatever we're creating is the absolute best of the best. It's the absolute pinnacle of human development, and it's absolutely wrong. Human beings and the planet develop in cycles. Civilizations rise and fall, and even within the Atlantean epoch, there were 7 great civilizations, even within the Atlantean epoch, that also rose and fell. We have 7 great civilizations within our post-Atlantean epoch that are rising and falling, and one of them is clearly falling now. So when we don't understand our past, we become very confused. And not only do we become confused, we become subject to manipulations. Okay, we become vulnerable to lies. Lies that can take our personal power away and go towards creating a future that we really don't want. We are not evaluating our deep history correctly because we're not factoring in the reality that the earth and humanity shifts in density, that different things are possible in different eras of development. We project our material level of consciousness onto the past and the future, which creates delusions. It creates a delusional view of ourselves and our world. We automatically think that anything more advanced than our current understanding is alien, when there are much more reasonable explanations when we consider our own ancient past that had high technology. These miscalculations about our past leave humanity in a vulnerable place. where individuals can lie and create false ideologies about our past, our origins, and humanity, would have no idea they are being manipulated. And so this materialist worldview, that only what I can experience in the material plane is true, that's all I'm going to invest in, that's all I'm going to work with, is delusional. It creates delusions. And everything that exists within the material plane is actually a reflection of something that has already happened in the spiritual plane. So it's not even accurate to use the material plane as the origin for anything, as the origin point for any calculation. It is actually the material plane, the earth, is really a point of transformation. It is the point of death and rebirth. That's what this plane is all about. And that's what we have to see it as. We can only see that when we understand that this earth itself, if we go back far enough in time, was just an astral blob. Then it was an etheric body. Then it got denser, and then it got denser. And humanity is right there with it. Humanity doesn't just come to the earth at some random time because aliens dropped humanity off. There's that alien thing again. Everything that's happened that's a natural cosmic event is suddenly an alien did it. An alien seeded the earth. An alien brought that craft here. Let's stop denying our own history and the reality of our own planet's formation. And let's stop crediting that to alien beings that actually aren't alien at all, which we'll cover in our next video. Once the planet reaches that etheric level, which is slightly more dense than astral, again, it materializes into a solid form, but not forever. It rises again into a spiritualization arc where the planet rises back into the astral plane. And humanity, again, has been with the planet from the very beginning and can, if the human being awakens, go with it to the very end. So, thank you guys so much for being with me today. This is only the first lecture in a series that I'm going to do about the esoteric secrets behind disclosure, or the esoteric concepts that are missing from the disclosure conversation. So I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to give this video a like, comment, share this video with your friends and your family, and look out for the next lecture in the series. If you like this material, please do consider joining my website, where I do live Q&As every second Sunday. I just take your questions, and where there's a ton of extra content just like this. So I'll see you next time.